This is Lori from Peace, Love, and Therapy. Today I'm coming to you with a subject that I've been discussing with some people around me in the last week or so. And it's about why I've heard people ask, why are there so many more transgender people than there used to be? So it's an interesting question. Um, when I was growing up, we had no language for transgender individuals. I believe when I was growing up, maybe in high school, I heard the word transsexual, and it was used for someone who had had surgery to change their body and probably made some transition in life, but he never heard the word transgender. And I really didn't have any language to talk about this. I grew up in a really conservative place in a conservative family, and these were just not subjects we talked about. And I'm not even sure they came up because people were not generally open about their gender identity. They may not even have known what gender identity was. They just knew they felt uncomfortable or didn't fit in at some level. My own wife, who I've known since I'm 10 years old, didn't have language. Just knew that she was a girl and that she didn't fit in, even though she was assigned male at birth. And even though I knew of her situation, we didn't talk about it because we didn't have any language for it. So I think that's a really important point, is now there's much more language in the last few decades, especially in the last 10 years, for gender identity, being non-binary, being gender questioning or queer. Those were all things that, at least in the world I grew up in, I wasn't aware of. So I think that's one thing. You hear it more. We talk about it more. You hear more people talking about they might be transgender or gender questioning simply because we have language for it now. I think another thing is there's more acceptance. I've talked in previous videos about something called the wall, which is sort of a fortress that many transgender people build up around themselves, or gender questioning individuals build up because it doesn't feel safe to say to someone, hey, I'm not really a boy, I'm a girl. They don't know how that would be accepted either in their families or their school or their community. And so that wall was a necessary protective thing that was built. And I think young people now have less of a wall. Maybe they don't construct a wall because at a young age, they often have heard these terms and they understand them and they know this is an experience that people have. So they don't tend to build up those walls. So they're much more free to, in many cases, to bring that up. Excuse me. Not everyone, of course. Some people are still in situations where that is not something talked about in their household. They don't really recognize that there are transgender people around them. And the place where they live may not feel as safe to discuss those things. So that's still something. Another thing that my wife brought up that I thought was really interesting and probably true is I think that growing up we felt, we're in our early 50s, early mid 50s, we felt that we were supposed to conform to the family norms. So if our family presented as religious, good citizens, normal, we really felt like we had to fit into that. This individuality wasn't as pronounced as maybe it is now. And I think it's a good thing that younger people are feeling free to say who they are, even if it's different from their family. So I think that's a really good point. I think that the social norms in our society in general have changed, that people feel freer to be who they are and to put words to that and to maybe discuss it. Of course, this is very general, right? A lot of people don't feel in that place, don't feel safe. They're not a young person and they're just sort of figuring out. I have clients who've been in their 50s and 60s, just now understanding why they haven't fit in life, and wondering why they're so uncomfortable in relationships and why they have the wall up that prevents them from having intimate, even friendships, because they're still hiding a part of who they really are. So I think those are all really interesting ideas. I'd love to hear in the comments if you have any ideas about um, why this is so much more talked about and more people are identifying. One thing I want to say is there's almost a negative connotation to this. Some people who don't understand and don't have experience with anyone who's transgender, or maybe even feel like it's wrong at some level, may say, well, there can't possibly be this many more transgender people than there were when I was growing up. And you might be in your 40s, 50s, 60s. So there's almost a negative idea that it's sort of like you hear people saying, why are there so many more autistic people? Right? That's a question. So let me know if this hits you as a negative comment that our people are making. I do think it's a good discussion. I think it's a useful discussion. I do know people who have more my age when I say, well, we didn't really have language for this. How could we have talked about it? And that's sort of given them a light bulb moment. So again, any comments that you have, I would welcome. I'd love to see what your perspective is on this really important issue. Have a great day.